year we celebrated Mother's Day, and usually at this time of the year people set festivities for the activities of women, but some issues remain unresolved, like of course gender inequality, empowering women, and societal disintegration. And the question that always raises itself: when can we see women in leading positions, in decision-making positions? These are some questions that we always ask ourselves whenever we celebrate Women's Days or Mother's Day, or we celebrate the activities of women. But most importantly is the main question: how far women have gone and how far will they go? We're very delighted to have with us Dr. Fatma Khafega, women's rights activist and member of the Alliance of Arab Women, and expert in development field. Good afternoon, Mrs. Khafega.
Thank you very much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you. And definitely March is all about women. It reminds us have been a lot of milestones, like Dina mentioned. There's the International Women's Day, there's the Egyptian Women's Day, the Mother's Day, and in our discussion today, we'd like to ask you about the role of the woman. And do you think being in less roles and higher in the hierarchy and higher in the hierarchy, is it due to the fact that the women are not objecting enough, not calling enough for having equal positions and equal rights?
Yes, I would tend to think so, because actually we have so many women activists. We have a National Council for Women. We have so many NGOs, women's NGOs and feminist NGOs. But we can't say that we have a movement, a women's movement, because I think a women's movement presents a will for action. Yes. We have been involved very much in analysis of what really discriminate against women, why do we have gender discrimination and inequality and so on. But when we look at action, it's not really sort of also promising as the analysis is actually. Changes for the position of women are countries that had strong women's movement. To have a strong women's movement, we need to be organized. And organization is not actually an easy thing. There are sources of power. For instance, women in Egypt, we are half the population. We're more than 40 million, and this is power in itself. But this power, without being organized, cannot achieve much. I think now women are realizing that they need to organize themselves. They are even training themselves on how to get organized. They're, activists coming together and agreeing on maybe a minimum agenda of what are the most important problems that have to be tackled at present. But this will take time.
Right. In spite that we have very prominent characters and very prominent women here, women activists, and we have awareness, so women developmental awareness and all that, yet we don't see real inspiring, moving and revolutionary movements like the ones in South Africa, for example, empowering movements that could really raise awareness. We don't see Nobel laureates like in South Africa. We don't see presidents. So where do you see the difference between us and a developing country like those in South Africa? Although that we have come a long way more than them, yet we haven't achieved the same developmental rights.
Because I think also we have several particular problems. For instance, there is a use of misinterpretation of religion to put women down, to always make them feel that they cannot be equal, that they're more glorified in the reproductive role as mothers, as wives, and so on. And this is being perpetuated, all the time in curriculum, in schools, and sometimes in the media, and so on. So it really creates a mentality of the woman herself that she should be happy if she is a good mother, if she is a good wife, but not as a good somebody who works, somebody who has a decision-making position, someone who is a politician, someone who is scientists, it has changed a bit, but not much, because there is still a use of religion in our misinterpretation of religion, of making this divide between men and women. Maybe in other countries they didn't face the same thing, actually. So and there are some sort of traditions and cultures that still prevail, although the whole context has changed. I mean, the political context, the economic context has changed, but culturally people are not, and usually it takes more time than, changes in economic context, for instance. And there are, some traditions and customs like early marriage, like female genital mutilation and so on, are still persistent, actually. And maybe also we are not very much in a stable position after having 2 revolutions, and things are changing. But I mean, we can see glimpses of changes, but I think they will take time, they will take much more effort. And I very much believe that women in different, in different forums, like in political parties, in syndicates, in NGOs, have to really be more powerful, have to have an agenda, have at the end come together with one agenda, because that's where the difference will be made. That's how they can influence things.
Yes. At the beginning of your talk, you touched on, I think, the most important element of the whole story, which is how to get together in terms of women and women movements and NGOs supporting women and the equality cause, in order to have the real impact and change, because silos working is not achieving the radical change. It is achieving some progress, but not the radical change that we really aspire to see, and how we see women in equal roles and equal positions and taking the full rights.
Yeah.
So, in your opinion, is there any sort of movement or motion or initiative you think that is going into this direction, like, the partnership of 2 or 3 NGOs or movements that is having focus on this in Egypt?
Yeah, we have examples actually of how NGOs or activists have come together. For instance, on violence against women, because there were different NGOs, different movements that really were working against violence against women. So they have to come together actually in many instances to do good work, and they manage. I mean, I think with their influence and pressure, then the penal code had a new article on definition of what is sexual harassment, for example. I tend to believe that also because of raising awareness of these NGOs, there is less of maybe sexual harassment on the streets. We can see this. So this is an example of how, when people work together, they can have much faster influence than working separately. There are, now we can say, like, we have, I think, 89 women parliamentarians in the parliament. We are looking forward that they come together actually. Yes, I mean, they have to work for or address problems for both men and women, but also as being women, and also exercising some of the discrimination that is practiced against them. We expect them to talk about also women's issues. We expect them to talk about the reform of the family law, which is very important. We expect them to have a whole law on violence against women, not only sexual harassment, but to have a comprehensive law that talks about services that should be provided to victims of violence. They should, the role of witness when violence takes place, and so on. So we need a comprehensive law, and not just 1 or 2 articles in the penal code. We expect the women parliamentarians to come together and really sort of present draft laws, and also work with women NGOs, because women NGOs are very good at drafting laws, and many of them I know they have drafted laws on violence against women, on a reformed family law. So this connection between NGOs and parliamentarians, women parliamentarians, can be very good. So now for the first time, we have this number in the parliament, but we expect them to actually first collaborate together inside the parliament, and also collaborate with the feminist and women's NGOs.
Right. When it comes to a thorough, deep look over women's problems, we could see that the most dangerous enemy for women sometimes are women themselves. When they sacrifice their rights when it comes to victims of violence, like you kindly mentioned, domestic violence, harassment, their freedoms, their basic rights when it comes to the social status. Many other basic fundamental rights, they give it up freely, and because they were bred up in such a manner that they should be doing that. So how do you think we could address problems like that, or difficulties, challenges like that? Yeah. Do you think through a comprehensive law? Do you think through awareness? Do you think through education? What does it take to change that?
I think what you mentioned are really the structural causes for the problems we have, because it's until now the way many women in Egypt socialize their children is quite discriminatory, and they are still perpetuating it. But when we look at the causes for that, it's actually lack of good education. It can be poverty, actually, because women, when they are poor and they come from poor families, mothers, they are very keen to marry their daughters. So they want to show that their daughters are obedient, will be good wives, and so on. And they don't have so much ambitions, and they will please their husbands they will marry, and so on. So they socialize them in this way to give up their rights, actually. So we have to address poverty, we have to address illiteracy, we have to have good quality education, because this is the only way that things would change, because change has to come also with governmental interferences that would change the whole context.
Willingness. The willingness to change.
Willingness, and we should have also political will to change, because we cannot really expect individuals to change, because there is a high risk. If you are an individual and you want to change, you're taking a high risk. But if there is a collective change, then change can happen. And collective change can happen if we have good education, if we have programs against poverty, if we have we overcome illiteracy, and we address cultures and traditions that are
enforce the law.
Pardon?
And enforce the law.
And also enforce the law. This is and no impunity for those who actually disregard the law.
So with the extreme changes in the country over the past 5 years, do you think any sort of positive change happened for the benefit of the woman in the society?
Yes, I would say that there has been a personal change. When one talks to young women especially, they're not going to be the same, actually, or many of them are not going to be the same. They're much more claiming the rights. They're much more aware because they participated in the revolution. They were side by side with men. They've done everything possible, and the whole world has really witnessed how the Egyptian women have participated. And in return, they want to see themselves recognized as equal individuals and equal citizens. And this spirit of wanting to change, maybe that change has not happened yet, but it will be difficult actually to put them down again, to discriminate against them again. They need to be helped, as I said, by also another larger changes. But there is a change in the whole personality of especially young women.
Yes. Finally, Dr. Fatma Khafaga, the women's rights activist and member of the Alliance of Arab Women and expert in development field, would like to thank you very much for joining us. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you very much for having me.
Let's move to the upcoming story and returning back.